After 17 years living in France, I just spent 3 weeks back in America. And at times, I felt like a tourist in my own country. I'm Susie, I'm American, and I've been living here in Dijon, France since 2008. So when I returned to the States for 3 weeks this past summer, I decided to try to film or at least notice things that made me do a double take while I was there. Can you guess what caught me off guard about what you just saw? But first, what exactly is reverse culture shock? For me, it's that disorienting feeling that I get when I return to the US after having been abroad for an extended period of time. Personally, I feel both immediately at home in the US, and at the same time, I feel a bit like I'm seeing my home country from a foreign perspective. I feel like I'm experiencing it when certain things that wouldn't have even registered in the past suddenly seem surprising to me. Personally, I've only spent about 6 months cumulatively in the US since I moved to France in 2008, and it had been about a year and a half since the last time I was in the States, so I found myself experiencing this sensation on several occasions. But before we get into it, I just wanted to mention that if you haven't signed up for my email newsletter yet, you can do that by scanning the QR code here or by clicking in the link in the video description below. All right, let's dive into what surprised me when I was in the States. I tried to organize these things loosely by category. So we're going to start first with food. So what do you think I was noticing when I pulled out my phone to film these things? It was the sheer size of some of the American produce that I saw. I just couldn't believe how enormous the onions were, or the strawberries were, or the blackberries were. For comparison, I went to the cupboard and I got this onion so I could show you the size of a typical French onion. And compared to the American onions that I saw, it looks pretty wimpy. And then there were a few things that I noticed in terms of coffee. The first thing was just the sheer size of the to-go cups, which of course I knew about in the past. But again, I was just surprised when I noticed it again in the States. And then also this was exciting, and I had never noticed this before, was the fact that you could also use oat milk in addition to half and half and milk. There was oat milk as well in some places that you could use for your coffee. Here in France, it's pretty rare to see to-go coffee at all. I guess sometimes you see it in like a rest stop or in vending machines. But then, even then, the cups are quite small. And oat milk, I think, is becoming more popular. I just had a delicious oat milk latte at a cafe in Dijon the other day. So I think it is starting to become more popular, but you definitely don't see it just out on the counter for you to take as you wish to use in your coffee here in France. And in the same vein, we saw this when we went to an amusement park, an all-you-can-eat condiment bar, which was very exciting. So, of course, we stocked up on a bunch of ketchup for our amusement park French fries, because here in France, you'll just get a packet or two of ketchup if you order fries. So it was very exciting, and it almost seemed luxurious to have as much ketchup as we could possibly want. And then, of course, there's the ice that's everywhere. Ice for your drinks, ice to keep your drinks cool. There just seems to be a never-ending flow of ice. People have drawers in their freezers that just magically restock ice all the time. And of course, I knew this as well, but it was just very flagrant this time. It was just something that I noticed. And people are very well equipped to keep their drinks cold. In addition to having lots of ice in their drinks, many people have thermos water bottles, or they have fancy thermos coolers that they bring with them to the beach. I just found that keeping your drinks cool seems to be much more of a priority in the States than it is here in France. The plethora of ice seemed very almost festive to me. I thought it was really fun for some reason. I was getting a big kick out of it. And my husband did too. He resolved to buy an ice maker when we got back to France. I don't know if we'll actually do that, but it is true that when we want to make frozen cocktails, for example, here in France, we have to plan in advance and start making our own little ice cubes with our tiny little ice trays well in advance, or we have to go to the store and buy a bag of ice. Whereas in the States, it seems like everyone just has their own personal stock of ice. It's amazing. Now, moving away from food and moving on to transportation and infrastructure, here are a few clips that I filmed when we were on the highway, and maybe you can see what we thought was pretty surprising about these clips. Passing on the right, it's not just rude in France, but it's also illegal. In fact, it goes against Article R414-6 of Le Code de la Route, which is France's comprehensive traffic code. And in France, it could result in a hefty fine and getting 3 points taken off your license. Whereas in the States, we saw people doing this quite frequently. And again, it sort of, as the passenger, it kind of made me kept going like this. Like I was a bit scared having these cars whoosh by on our right. And again, just something surprising that I noticed. Granted, I don't drive very much myself here in France. And I think when we were in the States, I don't think I drove at all. I think I was just the passenger. But in the past, I've sort of thought as drivers in France as being quite aggressive. But I was really surprised by some of the sort of like, I don't know, aggressive driving that I saw when we were in the States this last time. And motorcyclists without helmets. Granted, I know that this is not okay in every state in the US, but where we were, I saw it. And again, I was just very shocked. In France, of course, this also goes against Le Code de la Route. Let's see, Article R43-1. And if you're caught riding a motorcycle without a helmet, then you risk a hefty fine and losing 3 points off your license. And then there were these gigantic trucks that we saw on the road as well, not just the giant 16-wheelers, but also the massive pickup trucks, which again was just kind of surprising and almost a bit intimidating when we were driving around in the US as well. Then one night we were at this lovely beach and we were enjoying the sunset. And we turned around and we were walking through this little residential neighborhood. And I suddenly had this sensation that there was something sort of hanging above me. And I looked around and again, I whipped out my phone because I was like, oh, I can see, I know what it is. I can tell what the thing is that seems strange here. And of course, it was all of the power lines hanging everywhere. Granted, I live in Dijon, which is, has a medieval downtown, and you don't see any of this whatsoever where I live. Outside of my house, in fact, there are some power lines hanging on our street. We live in a more, modern street. So you do see power lines in France as well. But just the sheer quantity of the number in the States, again, in certain places, it just really stood out to me. And the reason I took out my camera to film at this moment was because I literally had turned to my right again as the passenger, and I was looking for the stoplight, for the traffic light immediately to my right, because in France, traffic lights are located right at the intersection. And I was confused for a moment. I was like, where's the light? And then I looked across the intersection and I noticed very far ahead of us were the lights that we were supposed to be, watching that were for us. And again, it was just that in that moment, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. All of the lights are across the street and can sometimes be very far away. Whereas here in France, most of the time, they're just immediately to your right when you arrive at the intersection. So it's just a little habit, I think, that we get into as well, just when you're arriving at an intersection, knowing where to look for the traffic lights. And I feel like it's in those moments of confusion where I'm really experiencing that sort of reverse culture shock, or I'm noticing the differences between where I live and the way things are organized in the States. And what about these clips? Look closely. All lovely homes, but I started to notice something. Some of the shutters are purely decorative. I think all of the shutters are purely decorative, but some of them are only actually a fraction of the size of the actual window. So no one could actually close these, and they're not functional whatsoever. And when I noticed it, I started to see it everywhere, and I just thought it was funny. Compared to here in France, where when you see shutters on windows, they are most frequently used. People use them quite a lot to close their windows every night or when they're gone. And so it's completely different in the States. I think they're just purely decorative. And then moving on to the last category, which is not a category at all. It's just kind of a grab bag of some other things that I noticed when we were in the States. I thought this was really funny. There was pickleball everywhere. It's like pickleball mania, which I thought was great. Where I was filming this group of people, there were a lot of people out in the morning playing pickleball. And I even played a little bit myself and even participated in a pickleball tournament when we were in the States. And it was really fun. It was the first time I had ever played. And again, just the number of times I heard people talking about pickleball and how much time I spent playing pickleball, I realized that this is kind of a new phenomenon, or in any case, something that I had never experienced before in the States, which was quite fun. The last two things, I don't have any actual video footage to succinctly illustrate what what I felt, but the first thing was the lack of privacy in public bathrooms. I mean, I could tell the first time I went to a public bathroom in the States, I was just a bit taken aback by the fact that there's just, so much space under under the door and so much space around the door, and you just feel like you don't really have any privacy. So again, that made me a little bit uncomfortable. It's fine, of course, I was fine, but it's just something that I noticed. And then the other thing that I noticed pretty much every day was just the sheer cost of everything, how expensive everything has gotten in the US, especially again compared to, our purchasing power here in France. Granted, the euro I think is a little bit stronger than the dollar right now, but nonetheless, I mean, things just seemed so expensive. Granted, we were in a very expensive part of the country. We're in the Northeast. So I think that explains some of it, but wow, everything, the food and restaurants and taxis, the types of things that you're buying when you're on vacation just seemed so expensive to us this time. After a certain point, I had to just kind of let go and tell myself not to worry too much about it. We had budgeted some money for spending while we were in the States, and I didn't want my anxiety about how much everything cost to ruin the vacation. So I just kind of gave in, but still it was quite shocking just to see how much everything cost there. We had a wonderful time in the States. It was amazing to reconnect with friends and family and spend time with them, and many of the places where we were actually very beautiful in their own right. But coming back to Dijon, I always feel this sort of renewed sense of appreciation for my adopted city. Last weekend, we went downtown just a few days after arriving back from the States. We went downtown and met up with a friend, and I found myself doing the same thing, just taking out my phone and filming where we were downtown, because it's just so physically beautiful here and clean and calm and peaceful. So I was also really happy to come home at the end of our trip as well. Walking around Dijon last weekend, and that sensation of being sort of in awe and having this sense of appreciation for the city itself, it was like I was experiencing reverse culture shock again. I don't know. It was just sort of a renewed sense of appreciation for the place where I live, and it was a nice feeling. I'm glad to be home. I'm almost at a point in my life where I've lived outside of America as long as I ever lived in America, and my impressions of both countries have just changed and evolved over time. Things that used to seem normal to me in America now stand out when I'm there. For example, the prevalence of to-go coffee everywhere. And things I've grown to love about France seem even more precious to me when I come back to France after having been gone for a while. I'm sure many of you have experienced this sensation of reverse culture after returning to your home country after having been abroad for an extended period of time. So I'd love to know in the comments below what sort of things surprised you when you returned home after having been gone for a long time. And speaking of transitions, if you are watching this video before Friday, September 12th, 2025, I will be giving away this copy of this book, 29 Days to France. I interviewed one of the co-authors, Stephen Heiner, here on my channel a few weeks ago. So if you haven't had a chance to watch that video and you'd like to learn more about this book, you can check that out. This summer, for the first time, we flew in and out of Zurich as opposed to Paris. And I did film the entire process, thinking that I would make it into a video and share it with you. But I'm not sure if that's the type of thing that you're interested in. So if you would like to watch a video, if you'd like to see a video about how to get from Dijon to a parking garage in Zurich and then onto the tram into the Zurich airport, I would be happy to edit that and make it into a more comprehensive guide. I'm just not sure if that's something people are interested in. So let me know in the comments below. I think that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching, and until the next time, à bientôt.